Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Outlandish Talmud Stories, Outstanding Life Lessons, class 33. Tonight's class is Make Progress, Not Excuses. Hello, welcome. We're just beginning. Take a paper. That's the source sheet. How are you? Good. Yeah, sure. All right, so tonight we're discussing Make Progress, Not Excuses. I want to thank the Garan families for dedicating tonight's class in honor, in memory of the yahrzeit tonight of Mr. Juan Garan, Rabbi Elchanan ben Moshe Zichrono Livracha. May his neshama have an aliyah. Thank you to everyone who's been dedicating these classes. If you would like to dedicate a class, which helps us keep doing this, that would be much appreciated. Thank you very much. There's a link in the video description. The link to the class store sheet is also in the video description if you're joining us online. And we are ready to get started. Are you ready? Good. It's also for you. You can ask questions. You can talk if you want. Okay? So let me tell you the story about a little boy named James. This happened a little while ago. It was reported in the news. 11-year-old boy James, who made a very big and bold decision in his life. He's going to graduate high school. And you're going to ask, what's the big decision about graduating high school? Well, let's learn a little bit about James' background. James grew up in a rural, war-torn city in Uganda. And by the time he was 6 years old, he lost all of his family, parents, and siblings to a disease. And he was raised by his grandmother. His grandmother barely made any money. She couldn't afford any school tuition. So really going to school, let alone finishing school, was out of the question. But when he was 11 years old, him and his grandmother made a decision. He's going to graduate school. How's he going to do that? So he drew up a plan. The first thing he needed was a goat. If he sold a goat, he'd make a few dollars. So his grandmother found a goat, which they sold. And with that money, he was able to buy a new pair of shoes, a new exchange of clothing, and a ticket for the 8-hour bus ride to the main town where he could attend school. Arriving to the town where he stayed with his aunt, now he had to get accepted into the school without a penny in his name. So he knew that he had to make it into the principal's office. And the only way to achieve that was to climb over a barbed wire fence and to avoid being detected by armed security guards around the school, which he did. And he made it to the principal's office and he showed how his dedication and yearning to join school and to succeed. He managed to convince the principal, and sure enough, he was accepted in the school. Today, this James is approximately 33 years old. He's earned 2 master's degrees. He's a very successful person, and he has a great job. I don't know if your lives can compare to, or our lives can compare to James, but I want you to think about James for a moment, because James is not the norm. Not the norm, not only because of his life circumstances, that of course, thank God, many of us don't have that challenge, but we'll face other challenges. But the way that James dealt with his life circumstances was certainly out of the norm. Because of all people, James had every right, every possible option to make an excuse and to say, I cannot attend school, let alone graduate from school. I don't have a family, I don't have money, and it's simply impossible. Life has not been fair to me. And yet James refused to make any excuse, and he insisted on working hard to be able to achieve his goals. That's something that I want to learn about with you tonight. We're going to study indeed some outlandish stories in the Talmud to learn more about this and how each of us can take away such a lesson in our own lives. It's a message, I think, now more than ever in history that we need to be thinking about in our own personal lives. So the source sheet, you can download it. You have the link. We're studying from a passage of Talmud in Yuma, page 35b. In fact, we're going to be learning about 3 different stories in this text. And this takes us to different time eras, approximately 2,000 years ago. Well, the three characters of the three stories are all different times. Two of them are about 2,000 years ago. Sorry. One character was 2,000 years ago. One character is about similar, a little earlier. And the final character is about 3,500 years ago. Okay, so we're really going back in Jewish history here and exploring stories and lessons from some of our greatest people in our history. You ready? Let's read the text. Okay, the sages taught, a poor person, a wealthy person, and a wicked person come to face judgment before the heavenly court after they've passed away for their conduct in this world. To the poor person, the members of the court say, why did you not engage in Torah? If he rationalizes his conduct and he says, I didn't study Torah, you know why? I was poor. I was preoccupied with earning enough to pay for my sustenance. I had to scrape together a few dollars to get some food every day. And that's why I didn't engage in Torah study. So heaven responds back to him and they say, were you any poorer than Hillel, who was wretchedly poor and nevertheless attempted to study Torah? We've heard of the great Hillel. You heard of Hillel? Hillel and Shammai. So very often in the Talmud you have the school of Hillel and the school of Shammai who are constantly arguing with each other, but they originated from the two leaders of those schools, Hillel and Shammai. This is about the 1st century before the Common Era, or a little around then. And we've studied about Hillel and Shammai before, and apparently Hillel has a remarkable story. Let's learn his story. They said about Hillel the Elder, he's called Hillel the Elder because there were other Hillels also, so that's how they identified who this one was. Each and every day he would work and earn a half dinner, half of which he would give to the guard of the study hall, and half of which he spent for his sustenance and the sustenance of the members of his family. Hillel was very, very poor. So he would, first thing in the morning, he would work. They say he was a wood collector. He would gather wood from the forest and then sell wood for people's fireplaces, for their ovens, for their stoves. And he wouldn't earn very much, half a dinner, and only half of that he took for himself, and the other half he would pay the guard at the study hall. Now, just to make a point over here, interesting is that Hillel is going to work every day. Maybe you'd be surprised to hear, but this was very common back in the times of the Talmud. All the sages, almost all the sages, had a job. They worked for a living. In fact, the Mishnah says, Torah study without derech eretz, without being a man of this world and working for a living, is not considered very valuable. The sages frowned upon anybody who just, well, for most people who just dedicate their lives 24/7 to Torah study, and where they're going to earn a parnasa from it. You're not supposed to earn money from your Torah. You're not supposed to benefit personally from Torah. So you earn money with a job, and many sages had a job. Right? Papa, he made beer and all kinds of alcohols and spirits, and other sages were wood choppers, and other sages had different stores in the marketplace. It was very, very common. So this was Hillel's job. Now, why was he paying a guard for the study hall? Why does the study hall have a guard? Can you think why? So there's an entrance fee. Did you have to pay an entrance fee to get here tonight? There should be no entrance fee. But there should be an entrance fee. How are we going to keep the lights on? Very good. So there's different explanations for what the guard was doing there. One explanation, like you said, this guard was in charge of providing the candles, lighting the torches, keeping the place fueled with good coffee, good tea, etc. So it was his job to do that. Well, he collected money from the attendees. With that, he paid for it, and obviously he probably took something for himself to live as well. That's one explanation. Another explanation is very often the study halls were open a whole night. And during the night, it's not the safest of times, so the guard was there stationed at nighttime to keep everybody there safe, just like our security guard outside right now. Another explanation is that the study hall may have been in a very remote location. Not in the center of town. So even if it wasn't nighttime, even if it was daytime, but those remote locations were not the safest places to be. So there was a guard making sure that everyone was safe. Finally, there's one other explanation about why this guard was there. So if you recall, many months ago, we actually studied this story. You hear it many months ago? So we studied the story. Rabbi Gamliel was the head of the yeshiva, and he had a very strict policy of which students can enter. It wasn't open for everybody. And you had to be what's called Toho Kabara. Your inside had to be like your outside, or your outside like your inside. You had to be 100% genuine person. If you were a little fake, if you were a little disingenuous, if you were a little putting on a show, but on the inside you weren't really there, you were not allowed entrance into the Bet Midrash. It was only for the elite students. Now we learned the whole story. I think we learned the story. There's a whole politics about the leader Rabbi Gamliel. Eventually he was deposed, and another rabbi took over. And one of these first decisions was he opened the borders, he opened the doors. Anyone who wants to study Torah, whether you're 100% genuine or not, you're welcome to join us here. And it says that on that day they added either 400 or 700 tables to the study hall. Thousands of students were welcome that day that they weren't welcome earlier. So that was the guard. I guess the guard was more than just a security guard. He had to have a guard with very spiritual eyes to be able to look at the people's souls, to know if they were eligible of the caliber to be able to join the academy or not. In any event, that's what Hillel does. Every day he gives a little to the guard and a little to his family. You can imagine half a dinner. I don't think you can buy many supplies for your family, a bit of bread, a bit of salt, and I'm not sure what else. Well, one time he did not find employment to earn a wage, and the guard of the study hall did not allow him to enter. Now, if we understand the story that Hillel was a wood chopper, well, we're going to soon find out this was in the middle of the winter. And once the snow starts to fall, it's very hard. The trees, the wood is all wet, and you don't have many customers. So what are you going to do with that wet wood? So that may have been the story, and therefore he had no money. He had no money. He could not enter into the study hall. So what did he do? He ascended to the roof, suspended himself, and sat at the edge of the skylight in order to hear the words of the Torah of the living God from the mouths of Shmaya and Avtalyon, the spiritual leaders of that generation. Climbed up to the roof to listen in to the class. Anyone up there? Wouldn't have a skylight. That's our problem. We should get some skylights. Now, that day was Shabbat Eve in the winter season of Tevet, around January time, and snow was falling from the sky. Now, what happened? He's lying there on the skylight and snow is falling. When it was dawn, and as you can see, they're studying a whole night, by the way, which again is the same point we made earlier, and even Friday nights. They went home, they had the Shabbat meal, and then what do you do after your Shabbat meal? The couch, raise your feet, enjoy a good book, play a game, yeah? But some people run to the study hall to study Torah a whole night. Well, when it was dawn, it was morning time, Shmaya turns to Avtalyon and he says, Avtalyon, my dear brother, every day at this hour, the sun is rising, the study hall starts to get brighter from the skylight, but today it's still dark. Is it perhaps a cloudy day outside? Focus their eyes and they see the image of a man in the skylight. They ascended and found him, Hillel, covered with snow 3 cubits high, 3 amot. So an amot is about 48 centimeters from your elbow to the edge of your middle finger. That's the average of an average person. That's called a cubit. So what's that in inches? I'm not sure. It's about 18 inches, huh? No. 48 centimeters, 18 inches. And 3 times that, about 6 feet high. Or about 4 or 5 feet high of snow. They extricated him from the snow. He must have been frostbitten or who knows what. And they washed him and they smeared him with oil to warm him up. And they set him opposite the bonfire to warm him. By the way, just interesting. So the other week was my grandfather's yahrzeit. He was a Holocaust survivor. And he actually was in the camp for a while. He broke out of the camp and he lived as a partisan with a group of friends in the forest for the next 3-4 years throughout the war years, evading the Germans. How do you survive in a forest for 4 years? It's very hard, especially the winter. So when it came to the winter months and a lot of snow in the Polish forest, I asked my grandfather, where'd you sleep? So he said, digging a hole to the bottom of the snow, 3, 4, 5 feet snow or more, digging a hole at the bottom is actually the warmest place. Contains the heat over there. But not when the snow starts to fall on you like Hillel, and then he's totally frostbitten. So once they warmed him up, they realized what he was there for. He wasn't allowed in because he didn't have any money. So they said, this man is worthy for us to desecrate Shabbat for him. Of course, we can desecrate Shabbat and bring him back to life. And it says, in fact, they gave him a lifetime membership for free to the Bet Midrash. Hillel could have made a few excuses in his life, right? He could have made a few excuses every single day, which he didn't. He supplied a bit for his family, a bit for the guard. That night that he had no money, for sure could have supplied excuses. But he insisted, I have to go and hear Torah from Shmai and Avtalion. They're the great sages at the time, they were the leaders. And he was literally Moser Nefesh. He literally almost gave his life away to study Torah. Which, by the way, raises a big question. He literally was endangering himself. It was winter, to sit on top of the roof to study Torah. Are you allowed to endanger your life to study Torah? No, you're not. There's three things you can endanger your life for, not to transgress idolatry or murder, whatever. But for everything else, you're not allowed to endanger your life to study Torah. What right does he have to sit on the roof and get frostbitten and almost die? He's not allowed to do that. Now, I understand he has a great passion, a great love for Torah, but he's not allowed to. The Torah says you're not allowed to. So some of the commentaries write, if you notice, there's two strange things in the language of the Talmud. One strange expression is it says that snow was falling from the sky. Really? And where else does snow fall from? From the sky. It's like, where should it come from? A snowblower. And then, during dawn time, when it's getting still dark, a Shemaiah says to Avtalion, is it a cloudy day today? What do you mean, is it a cloudy day today? It's winter, it's January. So the commentaries write that actually at that time the weather was more moderate and there was no expected forecast of snow, which explains why Hillel allowed himself to sit on the roof. He wasn't expecting snow. He looked at his app on the phone 2,000 years ago. There was no snow forecast. And it just, from the sky, meaning from out of nowhere, unexpectedly, the snow fell. And that's why Shmaya was also surprised. He says, is it cloudy outside? We didn't hear that there's going to be any snowfall. What's going on? Why is it so dark? Now, just another cute, I call it cute explanation. Some people are very into like gematria. You know what gematria is? The numerical values. You're into gematria? All right, so then here's one for you. Why did this whole drama, this whole episode happen with snow? I mean, you could say because that's what happened, but everything has a reason. Snow in Hebrew is sheleg. Sheleg, what's the numerical value of sheleg? Shin Lamed Gimel. 300 plus 30 plus 3 is 333. Very good. Now, there are three realms of Torah study. There's the Torah study of practical law. There's the Torah study of in-depth learning, and there's a Torah study of sod, of the mystical spiritual explanations. And Torah study is hinted into the word aleph. Aleph means to learn in Aramaic. First letter aleph, right, is to learn. Now, if you look at the numerical value of aleph, what is it? 1 plus 30 plus 80 is 111. So there's three of them, 111, plus for each of the three kinds of learnings. So Hillel was so committed to his teachers, Shmai and Avtalion, he wanted to learn everything from them. He learned practical law from them, he learned in-depth Torah study, and he learned the spiritual explanations. 3 alephs, 111 plus 111 plus 111 equals 333. So now we get into the 333, the snow all of a sudden is covering him, which reflects his desire of how much Torah he wants to be studying from his teachers. In the end, how much snow was gathered upon him? We said 3 cubits. Every cubit, this is Talmudic measurements, every cubit is made up of 6 tefach. Every amma, a cubit, is 6 tefach. A tefach is a fist. If you do 6 fists, you get an amma. So in 3 amma, 3 cubits, you have 18 tefachim. 18 is chai, 18 is life. Even though he was pounded upon with this 3 amot, 18 tefach of snow, but his life was not in danger, and actually he had the miracle of life bestowed upon him from Hashem, I guess in reward for his great desire to study Torah. All right? Good. That's story number one. Story number two. That's if you're a poor person. You have no excuse. You're poorer than Hillel, and he studied Torah, so why couldn't you study Torah? Now, story number two. A wealthy person comes to the heavenly court. And the members of the court, after he passes away, they ask him, and why did you not engage in Torah? Well, if he says, I was too wealthy and preoccupied with managing my estate, my possessions. So we say to him, were you wealthier than Rabbi Elazar, who was exceedingly wealthy and he still managed to study Torah? What's the story of Rabbi Elazar? They said about Rabbi Elazar, Ben Harsum, the son of Harsum, that by the way, he was a Kohen, not just a Kohen, but also a Kohen Gadol, a high priest, which may be the reason why this story is being brought here in the Talmud. These three stories, why are they being brought here in the Talmud? So it's a lot of discussion, but previously on the same page, Yuma 35b, the whole tractate of Yuma is talking about the festival of Yom Kippur and the service of the high priest in the temple. And in this page, it's talking about the garments of the high priest. There was a minimum required garment that the Torah describes that the high priest had to wear. What if the high priest wanted to wear fancier garments? He didn't want he wanted a big branding garment. So the Talmud says, within parameters, you're allowed to, and it brings some examples. As long as it's paid out of your own pocket. You can't charge the temple funds for your fancy clothes. So it says Elazar ben Charsum's mother, actually what she once did, she once made for him these exquisite clothing, high priest clothing for Yom Kippur, made out of the finest linens. But in the end, the sages did not let him wear it. Why? Apparently it was a kind of linen, a kind of material that was a little bit too see-through. And so when he put them on, you could see his body. And then the Gemara asked, how could it be? How could you see his body? It's not true, because every thread had to be woven from 6 threads. So anyhow, to be a kosher garment had to be so thick. So the Gemara answers, maybe it was a little too tight and it showed the contours of his body. I mean, nowadays, for some reason, this has become more popular clothing, but it's not appropriate. And so he was not allowed to wear the fancy clothing that his mother made for him because it just wasn't appropriate. So now we're talking about this guy. His father was a very wealthy man, left him an inheritance of 1,000 villages of land and corresponding to them 1,000 ships at sea. Could you imagine how wealthy you are if you owned 1,000 villages and 1,000 ships? Very, right? Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos just have to get worried about that. But what did he do? Each and every day, he took a leather jug of flour on his shoulder and he walked from city to city and from state to state to study Torah from the Torah scholars in each of those places. He could have lived like a king. He could have lived in a palace. He had a staff of thousands of people working for him. He could have been involved in the business, who knows what, but he chose instead, you guys take care of the business, and I'm going to the study halls from day to day, bringing my little lunchbox with me, and I'm dedicating my life to study Torah. In fact, look what happened. One time, he was passing through the villages in his estate, right? There were many villages in his own, he owned all these villages. And the servants found him. Now, if you were living in that village, you were an employee of this company, right? Everyone, because this company hired everyone living there. So here's a guy living there. It's him. He happens to be the owner, but they don't know that for some reason. And they see him walking around. They did not recognize him. They thought he's a resident of the town. And they pressed him into service for the master of the estate. They asked him, what are you doing over here? You should be at work. You should be in the office. You should be doing something. Why are you just roaming around? He's the boss, right? So he said to them, I beseech you, let me be. I don't want to work. I want to go study Torah. They said, we swear by the life of Rabbi Elazar ben Harsum, the owner of this company, happens to be you, that we're not going to let this happen. We're going to report this back to the authorities. I imagine they did report it, but nothing ever happened, right? And the Gemara comments, in all his days, he never went and saw all his possessions and his property. Rather, he would sit and engage in the study of Torah all day and all night. Pretty amazing. You could be worth billions of dollars, have the whole world at your fingertips, and have zero interest. He never once visited a property, not one of his ships. He never once enjoyed any delight from that money. He spent his entire life in the study halls of Torah, day and night. So we told the wealthy person you couldn't study because you were too busy. Rabbi Elazar Mecharsam could have been a lot busier than you, but he chose not to. He made that choice. So we've studied the poor person, the wealthy person. Now one final person. If a wicked man comes to judgment, and after he passes away, the members of the heavenly court say to him, why did you not engage in Torah? So he may say, I was handsome, I was preoccupied with my evil inclination, I had so many distractions. If it's a male, he would say all the women wanted me. If it's a woman, she would say all the men wanted me. I was being drawn from party to party, from nightclub to nightclub. I was being sent text messages and fan mail and Instagram stories and getting thousands and millions of views. You think I had time to study Torah? I had many temptations. I was living the high life. Say to him, were you any more handsome than Joseph? Joseph, the son of Jacob, Joseph in the Torah. Yosef HaTzadik. What happened about him? He was known to be very handsome. The Torah tells us that he used to put a lot of effort into his looks. He used to comb his hair, he used to wear nice clothing. His father gave him a very nice cloak. We know that he was, at 17 years old, he was sold out by his brothers and then captured and then sold to the Midianites and then to the Egyptians, and then he was working for the house of Potiphar. And Potiphar's wife took a liking to him. So they said about Joseph the righteous, each and every day, the wife of Potiphar seduced him with words. He was the servant in the home, but she tried to seduce him all the time. Think about it, a 17-year-old boy, your family thinks you're dead. You've been sold out by your family. No one knows you're even alive. Nobody even likes you anymore. You didn't have a family member in the world. You didn't have a friend in the world. You're 17 years old. You are of the age where everything inside of you is going wild. And now you're a servant in a foreign land. No one knows you're alive. And what chance do you have at life? And your owner's wife, the boss's wife, and this boss was a very high prominent member in Pharaoh's administration, and she's trying to seduce him, and maybe she has a way to help him in life. In addition, the clothes that she wore to entice him in the morning, she did not wear to entice him in the evening. What does that mean? Two explanations. One explanation is that she was constantly changing clothing. She never wore the same thing twice. You're laughing, right? She wore one garment in the morning and one garment at night, and he never saw that garment again. She always bought a new dress for him to see. That's one explanation. Another explanation is that during the day her husband went out to work, so she put on fancy clothing for him. Only the servant was home. In the evening, when the husband was coming home, she took off the fancy clothing and wore regular clothing, for her husband did not deserve her beauty. But for Yosef, she was trying to seduce with beauty. Must have had a great marriage, right? And the clothes that she wore to entice him in the evening, she did not wear to entice him in the morning the next day. So she was doing everything she could. One day, she says to him, this 17-year-old kid, submit yourself to me. I want you to have relations with me. He says to her, no. She says, I will incarcerate you in prison. I will report you. He says to her, I'm not afraid. Because King David said to Tehillim, God releases prisoners. You want to put me in prison? My God will take care of me. She says to him, I'll cause you to be bent over with suffering. I'm going to get you whipped and beaten and tortured. He says, I'm not afraid. The same passage in Tehillim says, God straightens those who are bent over. She says, I will blind your eyes. He says, I'm not afraid. The same passage says, God opens the eyes of the blind. God will protect me. You can do whatever you want to me, but God will protect me. She gave him 1,000 talents of silver to submit to her, to lie with her and be with her. As the Torah says, double expression, but it's an important expression, to lie with her and to be with her. Why the double expression? We'll find out in a moment. And no matter what she offered, he refused. Right? It's the other way around. He wasn't paying her. She was paying him to be with her, but he refused. Pretty amazing for a teenager who's been abused his whole life, or at least recently. And the Gemara said, had he submitted to lie with her in this world, it would have been decreed that he would be with her in the world to come. That would be the punishment. Because in the world to come, I guess she's probably burning in hell. I don't know where she is. He'd be with her also. So the double expression of the Torah, she's asking to lie with her and be with her. She's actually saying something. She doesn't even know what she's saying. She's saying, if you lie with me here, you're going to be stuck with me in the world to come. And he refused. The story of Joseph, by the way, is a very fascinating story, and there are all kinds of commentaries. Not everyone sees it as clear as this. Some commentaries say that, and even in the Talmud, it's brought down an opinion, he wasn't so firm the whole time, and we can imagine why. We don't judge him, of course. And in fact, he almost became seduced by her. And the commentaries say at the moment where he almost was becoming seduced by her, all of a sudden he had this mental epiphany, this visual image of his father came into his mind, this Yaakov Avinu, and he realized, oh my gosh, my father is Jacob, and I'm the next generation of the Jewish people. And he realized who he is and who he comes from and the family he's from. And now I'm going to go and commit this act of sin, this wife, Egyptian woman. So that saves him. There's another explanation in those words. The Hebrew says, Ra'ah demut yokno shel avid, which literally means he saw the image of his father. And that saved him. But if you look at the words more literally, it says, Ra'ah demut yokno, he saw his own image, shel aviv, that his father had of him. You know what that means? Joseph said, I know who I am. I'm 17. I'm totally on the other side of the planet. I've fallen off the world. No, I've fallen off the map. No one knows I'm alive. My brothers sold me out. No one cares about me. I have no future. I'm a nobody. I'm of no value to this world anymore. What? Why not? Why shouldn't I do this? However, that's how he thought about himself. He thought of no value. He thought he was worthless. But then he has an image of how his father thinks of him. How does Yaakov Avinu, our patriarch, think about his own son, one of the 12 tribes? Tzaddik, a righteous person, a holy person. Yaakov knows what he's truly capable of. Yaakov knows that Yosef is capable to be the great tzaddik which he ends up being. He's a father who gave confidence and strength to his child and allowed and caused his child to believe in himself. That's an amazing parent. Where a child feels like I have nothing to believe in myself for. He feels worthless, of no value. But there's this constant message from the parent telling the child, no, you are important. You're valuable, you're very necessary, and you can do incredible things. We believe in you. So his father believed in him more than he believed in himself. And it's that image of himself through the eyes of his father that saved him. And he said, well, my father expects this or believes this in me, maybe there's something to it. Which teaches you how a parent believes in a child, or how a teacher believes in a student, can literally save a child and save a student. That's why a child needs a parent. Or a teacher needs a good student. Or a student needs a good teacher, sorry. Very powerful idea. But the Torah says, the Torah says that Yosef refused. She grabbed him, and he refused, and he ran away. It's a beautiful teaching from the Gerer Rebbe, the Chidush Harim. The first Gerer Rebbe, his name is Yitzchak Meir Alter. He says something very beautiful, which is a good life lesson. If you look at the note of the Torah, it's called in Yiddish the trop, the note where we sing the Torah, on the word Vayima'in, there's a note there that only appears 4 times in the whole Torah. Most notes are very common, but there's a note called Shalsheles. Shalsheles is drawn like a zigzag, and it's a very big note. The reason why it's like a zigzag, that's how you sing it. It goes like this. Well, I'll sing it on the word Vayima'en. Vayima'en, he refused, and the refuse was done with a big note, Actually, no, I'm making a mistake, I think. It doesn't have that note. Something else. Sorry. After the word Vayimain, there's what's called a psik. A psik means a line, which means pause, and then you continue the rest of the sentence. Now, if you read the sentence in the Torah, there's no reason to pause. Vayimain is part of that sentence. He refused and he ran away. But the Torah says the way you should read it is he refused, stop, and then continue. Why the pause? So the Ger Rebbe explains, when you have a challenge, when you have a test, a desire, a temptation, whatever it could be, whatever you're dealing with in life, and you know that it's the wrong thing, you know it's unhealthy, you know it's not good for you, you know it's going to cause trouble, you know you're not going to feel good later about it, you know you're going to regret, you know you're going to be in a bad mood, you know all the consequences, but still it's much stronger than all the things you know. So how should you deal with that? The mistake would be to try to argue with it, fight with it, rationalize with it. Yes, no, but don't do it because it's not healthy for you. Don't do it because it's bad for you. Don't do it because you're not going to feel good after. That's the mistake. Why? Because no matter what rationale you'll ever provide, the Yetzer Hara is stronger than any rationale. Yetzer Hara knows how to say, I know it's not healthy. I know it's not good. I know you're not going to feel good about it after. I know you're going to regret it. I know you're going to feel like a piece of garbage after. But still, it's a moment of joy. It's a moment of pleasure. Just do it. You only live once. The Yetzer Hara is very clever. See, if we try to reason, it's never going to work. How do you overcome the Yetzer Hara? The word Vayimain, it's a refusal. Pause. Just an absolute refusal. No reasons. No explanation. No reason. No rationale. No arguing. No fighting. Just no. But why? No. But really? No. But don't you? No. No, no, no. That's the only language that can work to defeat the Yetzer Hara. Later, after the pause, we can get into why yes, why no, pros, cons, explanations. But at the moment of passion, at the moment of a heated desire, you have a choice to make, yes or no. And if you start to rationalize and explain, you'll never work. The only way is to hold your ground and just to give an insistent no, no, no. Oh my gosh, time is flying. So the Gemara concludes. Consequently, what do we have here? We have Hillel obligates the poor to study Torah, Rabbi Elazar ben Charson obligates the wealthy to study Torah, and Joseph obligates the wicked. If you think you have an excuse why you didn't study Torah, because you were too poor, because you were too wealthy, because you were too wicked, you should know you have no excuse. We have precedents, we have people in our history that had it worse than you did, and nevertheless they found the courage, the ability, the time, the interest to study Torah. Inspiring. And that one of the great commentators writes that we say every day in our prayers, and it's brought down into Tehillim, the verse that says, Rabot machashavot balev ish, there are many thoughts and plans in a person's mind, V'atzat Hashem hi takum, but it's the counsel, it's the plans of God that are always enduring, that are always pull through. Atzat Hashem hi takum. It's the plans of Hashem that they will always endure. The word He is spelled Hey Yud Aleph. He stands for Hillel, Yosef, and Elazar, the three characters of this story. So even though you have all your plans, I'm poor, I'm wicked, I'm uninterested, I'm not talented, I'm not capable, whatever it is, but it's the plans of Hashem that a person is obligated and capable to spend their life connected with the Torah. He takum, that'll always endure, because you can learn from Hillel, Yosef, and Elazar ben Charson. Hey, we're just getting started. We haven't even started yet. But thank you. So that is the three stories of the Talmud. Now I want to try to break this, with the time we have left, I want to sort of break this down a little bit and really bring it home. First of all, I want to analyze the first two stories. One is about the wealthy person, one's about the poor person. Because there's a general question. It's always asked, and we always think about. What is a greater challenge? Studying Torah, or a greater challenge to doing a mitzvah, or a greater challenge to leading a moral life? Challenge of poverty, or the challenge of wealth? If you had to be cursed with one of those challenges, and they are a curse, you know what King Shlomo says in Mishlei, in Proverbs? He says, "Res v'osher al titen li." Dear God, please don't give me not poverty and not wealth. In other words, it sounds like the best life is the life of moderation. I want enough. If I don't have enough poverty, that's a hard life. If I have too much and I'm wealthy, it's a very hard life. You know, poverty, we should never know about it. And poverty means that you don't have the money to buy food for yourself, you don't have money to buy clothing for yourself, you don't have money to pay for your rent. Poverty is very distressing. It's very stressful. There's a lot of anxiety, maybe a lot of depression. You lost your job, you can't get another job, you're not making enough money, you're not making ends meet, you're falling into debt, you got credit card debt, you got the phone calls ringing the whole day, you can't afford to pay for this, you can't afford to send your child to school, you can't afford to send them to camp, you can't afford to pay your rent, you can't afford anything. Very, very painful life. And you are very preoccupied. And your mind is not focused. So that's a challenge. In that state, are you able to still find time every single day to study Torah? You know, you don't have to study Torah a whole day, but you have to study Torah every day. The basic legal minimum of studying Torah is at least a passage in the morning and a passage in the evening. At some time, it could be for 5 minutes, for 10 minutes. Dedicate some time and really make it free time in your day to spend 5 good quality minutes in studying something by yourself, with a friend, but you have to do it every single day. But the poor man who wakes up and doesn't even know where his next meal is coming from and who's going to be calling him today for money that he owes, it's such a painful life. And we think, well, give me all the money in the world and then I'll be fine. But giving me all the money in the world, which is now the challenge of wealth, is possibly equally even more challenging. We find this dichotomy, interestingly, in the Torah. The Torah, when the Jews went into the desert after they left Egypt, and even though God had done all these miracles to save them, but what do? They complain, right? Like Jews like to complain. What did they complain about? That they're hungry and thirsty. We have no food to eat. Let's go back to Egypt. At least we had what to eat over there. So God makes a miracle. God gives them the manna from the heaven and the water from the rock. He gives them a lot of food. But when he gives them the manna from the heaven, which filled on every single day you had your food to eat for that day, God says, I'm giving you the manna, the man anasenu. I'm going to test you. What was the test? Victor, what was the test of the manna from heaven? So we find 2 schools of thought, 2 different groups of commentaries. Some commentaries write, it was a test of will. You have everything you need. You're always going to have a food supply. You're never going to have to work a day in your life. You're never going to have to wake up and worry, what am I going to eat today, what am I going to eat tomorrow. You always have everything you need. You have everything you need. You don't have to work. You got all the time in the world. You're like a retired person. What are you going to do with all your free time? Are you just going to choose to get more busy with nothing important? Or are you going to say, I have time. Let me study Torah. Let me get involved with holy work, communal activism. Let me volunteer. It's a test. Because it's so easy to say the golf course is more important and all the other kind of personal pursuits that you have. So that may have been a test of wealth. Other commentaries say that the whole manna from heaven was a test of poverty. What does manna from heaven mean? It means every day you were given the food for that day. Not for tomorrow, just for today. Tomorrow you're getting the food for that day. You're always dependent on your allotment for that day. A life of dependency is a bit like a life of poverty. I never had enough of my own to be safe and secure for the next week, year, 10 years, 30 years. I never had. But today I have enough for today. But tomorrow I don't have anything. The blessing will come tomorrow also. But there's a certain distress. There's a certain uncertainty. Very good. Which is Like the life of the poor person. The poor person has it even worse because he literally has nothing to eat. It's not even a guarantee because God's not going to. He has to work. He has to be all stressed about it. But you see that these two commentaries are arguing what's a greater test, the test of wealth or the test of poverty. So I want to tell you a story. The great Chassam Sofer, Moshe Sofer, from 500 years ago, very great rabbi. He once was staying in a house when he was traveling. It was a member of the great Rothschild family. The man was a very wealthy person, beautiful home, but he was a very pious person. He was committed to the Torah. He's hosting this great rabbi in his house, so he asks him, Thomas, 1 second. I think that the Siddur is a great source for daily learning. Very good points. Yes, if you pay attention to the text of the Siddur, and actually a lot of the prayers before we start, the morning prayers are actually Torah texts, and they're designed that we recite them and study them to be part of the daily Torah study. Very good. So anyhow, this Chassam Sofer is in the home of the very wealthy Rothschild person. And he has the opportunity to talk with the great rabbi. So he asks him, dear rabbi, I have a question for you. You've been staying in my house for a couple of days. I just want to make sure, is everything in my house in accordance with the Torah? Am I doing things right? Or should I be correcting something because I want to do the things right? So the Chassam Sofer tells him, actually, now that you asked me, I was going to tell you, but I'll tell you now. Nothing in this house is according to the Torah. Everything in this house is against the Torah. This wealthy man who was a pious person, he was losing it. My whole life, I'm trying my hardest to do what's right, and now you tell me that the whole home is against the Torah. What do you mean? So the Chassam Sofer laughed. And he said it because the Torah said, and it's one of the things that Moses tells the Jewish people before they go into Israel. The Torah says, Vayishman Yishurun, and the Jewish people become fat from their wealth and blessings, Vayivat, and then they kick, and then they rebel. People who get fat from blessings often rebel. Meaning, they think they're self-supporting. I'm fine. I don't need God in my life. Everything's fine. And here he says, you have everything you need, but you haven't rebelled. You're still a very pious Jew. That's against the Torah. Meaning against the prediction of the Torah. He's giving him a compliment. But what you see from here is that actually to be devoted to Hashem every day after you've amassed so much wealth is actually very difficult. You see this classically. I'll give you a clear example. Let's say, and as the rabbi, it happens all the time. Let's say one day you see someone in the shul who you haven't seen for months. And I'm not talking about because of COVID. Let's talk about pre-COVID era. Somebody shows up, you never come. I haven't seen you in months. What's the probable, even before I talk to the person, what's the probable explanation why they've come to shul? I can tell you right away. Something is wrong in their life. Someone's not well, they lost their job, there's a lot of stress. So something is going wrong, which is why they're turning to God. And that's always the case. I'll say 99.9% of the time. Did it ever happen that somebody showed up in shul and you say, hey, I haven't seen you in months, why are you here? And they say, you know, I just closed this unbelievable deal this week. I made more money than I could ever imagine. So I just want to be here in shul. Thank Hashem. Not as common. I'm going to be honest. In other words, most people think of God as a provider. That's what God is. It's like transactional. I pray to you and you provide. So if I need, I'll go pray. But if I don't need, I have it all. I don't need your provision anymore. Everything I have was provided by you. You lose that connection. So wealth is a big challenge. They say a story of a great Rebbe. His name is Menachem Mendel of Kotsk. Kotzker Rebbe. Kotsk was renowned for a path of serving Hashem with a lot of truth and honesty. No bluff. Absolute genuineness. When he was a young child, he was studying in school. And he was studying the passage that talks about when God gave the Jewish people a portion of manna every single day. That's what they ate in the desert. Now, the Torah says you got exactly what you needed. You didn't get grain more or grain less, whatever you needed, and that was your food supply for the day. Everyone got the same thing, what they needed. So this young boy raised his hand, and he asked the teacher a question, and the teacher had no answer. And the truth is, I don't have an answer. And I'm throwing it to you. It's an unbelievable question. You ready for the question? Everybody every day was given exactly what they need. How did anybody fulfill the mitzvah of tzedakah, of charity? Number one, I don't have anything extra to give to you. Number two, you're not missing out on anything. You don't need my tzedakah. That was his question. And the teacher was baffled, couldn't answer. Now, I want to just give a little commentary to this, what I think. I don't think he was asking like a technical legal question. One question you can ask is, there's a law, you have to give tzedakah. How did they fulfill the law? I think it was a much deeper question. More than the law, giving tzedakah, giving charity, helping out someone else, beyond fulfilling the law, actually defines you as a mensch, as a dignified person. Whereas if you just hold everything to yourself and you don't share and give to someone else, you are not a dignified person. Your life is of very little value. Your life receives value when your life is about much more than just yourself. Your life receives value when your life is about having another person in your life, thinking about something larger. So giving charity is more than just actually a mitzvah, it's actually what gives value to your life. How did the people in the desert, for 40 years, they couldn't give charity? What was the value to their life? It's a question. Think about it. So they actually gave, all right. So of course, I mean, there are a number of answers. I think first of all, this is talking about food, but there was so they gave away precious gems and materials to the Mishkan, to the tabernacle, to build the tabernacle. And by the way, you can give tzedakah more than just food or money. You can give your time to someone else. You can give your wisdom and your advice and your opinion. There's many ways to give tzedakah, right? It's like the guy comes to shul and he's sitting next to a lawyer, and they're getting bored during the prayer. So he, anyways, has an issue coming up in business. So he discusses with the guy next to him, the lawyer, right? This is before COVID days when you could sit next to each other, having a conversation in shul. What do you think? What should I do? So the guy gives him after Shabbat. He receives in the mail an invoice, $150. He said, "What's this for?" "What do you mean? My advice in the shul. Costs money." So there's a challenge of poverty. There's a challenge of wealth. You have to be mindful of both. Whatever is happening to you, learn from Hillel, learn from Abi Lazar, not to get distracted. Now let's talk about Joseph. How much time do we have left? Not enough. I'll just say two things about Yosef. The episode of Yosef is a strange one. Why? We said, if you're poor, learn from someone else who was poor. Hillel, right? If you're wealthy, learn from someone else who was wealthy. Who was that? Rabbi Lazar. They didn't make any excuses. And they committed those Torah. What's the third story? If you're wicked, learn from Yosef. But he wasn't wicked. He was righteous. Yosef had tzaddik. You're talking to a wicked person who says, my life was dedicated because I was good looking and I had all the girls and all the guys falling all over me and I was going from nightclub to nightclub. Learn from Yosef. Yosef's a tzaddik. Yosef's a righteous person. How do you tell a wicked? If you tell a wicked person to learn from another wicked person, you can encourage him that way. That's question number one. Question number two is, it seems like the first few stories we're talking about Torah study. You didn't study because you're poor, learn from Hillel. He studied Torah. You didn't study because you're wealthy, learn from Rabbi Lazar. He studied even though he's wealthy. You didn't study Torah because you're wicked, learn from Yosef, who controlled himself from sinning with the wife of Potiphar. Doesn't say he studied Torah. In fact, nowhere do we find that Yosef was so much engaged in Torah study. Yosef actually was busy running Egypt. He was an activist. He was a communal person, a righteous person, did wonderful things. But where's the Torah study element? How does this story match the previous stories? A short answer. I haven't. I want to hear yours. And Yosef saw himself as a Torah. Oh. And how's that related to Torah study? So I think I'm going to jump onto what you're saying and just add a little bit to it, okay? You guys don't have the Hebrew, the original language of the Talmud on your source sheet. I'm going to give you the English. But if you look at the English, all the questions that the heavenly court asks, what are the questions? Same question each 3 times. What's the question? Why did you not, what does it say? Why did you not engage in Torah? Why the word engage? Why did you not study Torah? What do you mean engage? You study Torah. So it's taken from the Hebrew. The Hebrew is also a little bit of a strange language. Let me just read the commentary from Benny. Joseph was arrogant and full of himself until he got into Egypt. There is transformed himself. Okay, so Benny suggesting Joseph was wicked, at least for a certain amount of time. He was arrogant and full of himself, and then he went through a transformation. Very interesting point, Benny. I'm sure there's something to that. And yes, a wicked person can learn from that. But now I want to take it a little bit further to clarify this whole story. The Hebrew is not why didn't you study Torah? It doesn't say that in the Hebrew. It should have said that, but it doesn't say that. It says Torah. Why didn't you esek? Esek is like engage, preoccupy yourself, which is a strange word to talk about Torah. Torah you study, right? Esek, the word esek is often the word for business. Esek is something you're preoccupied in. So esek is a business. An askan is a businessman. And here we're applying this word to Torah. Why did we not esek in Torah? You know what the answer is? The mitzvah is much more than studying Torah. There's a lot of people who study a lot of Torah, but they're not asik. They're not osek by Torah. They're not engaged with Torah. In the blessings in the morning, there's the Torah blessing. So there's 2 versions. One version is if you thank Hashem, al divrei Torah or al limud Torah. So there's one blessing. One version in some sidurim, some prayer books is about Torah learning. But there's another version in some prayer books that says la'asok b'divrei Torah, not to study Torah. I'm blessing Hashem to be engaged and immersed with Torah. Torah is much more than a subject. We don't aspire to study Torah. We aspire to love Torah and live with Torah. You ever saw somebody in the shul, again, pre-COVID days, the Torah comes out, and what do you do with the Torah after it comes out? Give it a hug. Give it a kiss. What a strange thing. Kiss. Just think about it. We grew up like this, but what did you kiss the Torah? That's strange. Open it up. Read it. Study. It's interesting. It's intellectual. What are you kissing? And it's an old Jewish custom. And the answer is we don't just study Torah. We do kiss Torah. Torah is not just an occupation of the mind. Torah is equally, or if not more so, an occupation of the heart. Shem said, I don't want you just to study my Torah, to be the student in an abstract way, sit back, study, and then walk. No. Torah has to be a force that transforms your life. You become a Torah person, like a Torah Jew. What does it mean? Because I studied a lot of Torah. I know a lot of Torah. It's much more than wisdom. You have to fall in love with Torah. Like your own child, like your own parent, like a loved one. I know them. You don't know your child. You much more than that. You have to know them, of course. You have to talk to them. You have to get to know them. Very, very important. You can't be one with them. You can't love them if you don't know them. It's also very important. You can't love something you don't know. You also can't love the Torah if you don't know the Torah. So you have to know it. You have to study it. But the question here is more about learning. It's about esek. It's about engagement. If you look at Yosef's life, even though there's no clear reference, he spent time studying Torah. But the whole story of Yosef is somebody who is in love with Torah. A person who can survive what he survived and remain a moral beacon of light and of holiness and of godliness in Egypt, captured away from his family, is only a person who is in love with Hashem and in love with the Torah. That's his whole story. So that's what we're telling the person. No, why don't you study Torah? Why aren't you immersed in Torah life? And learn from Yosef. Yosef was not wicked. We're not focusing, this is very important. When somebody is wicked, what does it mean? We're saying, you lived a wicked life. Look how immoral your behavior was. You were just caught up with all kinds of sin and inappropriate behavior. That's not the question. Let's go a little deeper. And why were you involved with all that kinds of behavior? Because you have a fiery, burning Yetzer Hara. You have this passion inside of you. It's full of temptation, full of desire. I'm feeling it. I got this thing beating inside my heart to eat this and to do this and to be with this person. It's a burning desire. The mistake people sometimes make is, if I have those inappropriate temptations or desires, then I'm a bad person. I call myself a rasha, a wicked person. And we did. That's your mistake. Because then you say, I'm a bad person. You called yourself a bad person. And then you say, well, what right do I have to study Torah? Why should I even come to shul? Why should I? I'm an impure person. I'm filled with impure thoughts. It's inappropriate for me to even get close to the Torah. That's all your mistake. You told that whole story to yourself. Learn from Yosef. Who was Yosef? Yosef had a burning heart also. Yosef was a 17-year-old boy. His hormones were flying. He could have done anything and no one would have known. He had the chance of a lifetime to be with the wife of Potiphar. You think he didn't have a burning heart? He did have a burning heart. But he said, but I'm not a bad person. I can't control that. Hashem gave it to me. But I can control my behavior. And I can choose to refuse. Which is what he did. So we tell a person, tell yourself, do not translate inappropriate desires and a lot of things going on with your heart and temptations. Don't translate that into, I'm a rasha, I'm a bad person. No, you're not. You are a human being. God created you that way. Learn, however, to control. And you can learn to control from Yosef. And then you're not a bad person. Then you can be a tzaddik, a righteous person, even with all that stuff going on inside your heart. So in conclusion, let me conclude here and then it's your turn. Sorry. We all fall trap to making a lot of excuses in life. Right? What's my excuse? I didn't have any time. I'm not so capable, I'm not so talented. I'm not the right guy. Hey, it's not for me. I'm too preoccupied. My wife, my husband, my kids, my job. A million excuses. Right? Why do we make excuses? So psychologists talk about it a lot. There are all kinds of reasons why you make excuses. I have a list here of 5 reasons why somebody might make an excuse in life. Maybe it's made out of fear, right? Fear of the unknown, or fear of failure, or fear of making a mistake. Somebody says, come do something, and you make an excuse. No, you don't show up to the meeting. You don't show up to the job interview. Why? You had an opportunity. I wasn't feeling good today. What happened? You were just afraid. You weren't ready to get up and try something new. That's one reason. Another reason, a person's comfort zone, familiarity. I'm so stuck and comfortable here. I don't want to try anything new. But maybe you could bring new blessings and new realizations and discover more potential in life. But I just want to be small and comfortable. Number 3, a person has lack of goals or lack of motivation. You have no drive. You have no drive to go push further, to explore more, to learn more, to be more. If you don't have that, don't make excuses all the time. Number 4, procrastination and laziness. Right? Number 5, comparison and self-doubt. It's another terrible thing when we're comparing ourselves to other people. I'll never be like him. I'll never be like her. They started the business. They can show up. They're studying Torah. I'll never be like them, and therefore I'm not even going to try. Why should you ever be? Why do you want to be like them? Be like you. So there's plenty of reasons to make excuses, and we do it all the time. Fear of success, says Gary Bums in the Shkoach. Very true. That's a big fear. Self-doubt. You don't believe in yourself. So you make excuses. So here's what we need to know. Especially when it comes to the subject of the Talmud, studying Torah, being engaged with Torah, showing up, doing a mitzvah, and connecting with Hashem. And you make an excuse, I couldn't, or whatever. Here's the thing. Even if your excuse is valid, right? You can have valid. We all come up with many valid excuses. At the end of the day, what is your goal? What are you trying to achieve? If you're trying to achieve that you are still morally clean, excuses will achieve it for you. Yes, we won't fault you, we won't blame you that you didn't show up and you didn't come and you didn't do the mitzvah, you didn't study Torah because you had an excuse. Okay, it's a valid excuse. So if you want to walk away morally clean, you've achieved that. But if you want to walk away with results, no excuse in the world will ever get you there. So what's your goal? Always to be safe and good? Fine, you'll be safe and good with excuses, but you won't have achieved anything. So as the famous line goes, if it's important to you, you'll find a way. If it's not, you'll find an excuse. That's the bottom line. If you ever make an excuse about something, you're basically saying it's not so important to me. Because if it would be important to you, you would not allow yourself to make an excuse. You would look for the results to get it done. If James, at the beginning of our lesson, could graduate, get 2 master's degrees, and succeed in life with his life's background, stop selling yourself short. Stop making those excuses. Even though you can, you have every right to make the excuse, and you're not going to be a bad person, you're going to be a good person. But you're not going to have achieved what you can achieve, what you should be achieving, what you must be achieving. Let's learn from Yosef and from Hillel and from Rabbi Elazar. It doesn't matter the challenge you have, and you have challenges. This is not to suggest that you don't have challenges. You do have challenges. They had challenges. But if it was important, you found a way to achieve it. Good night to our online crowd. See you next week, same time, same place. God bless you.